Well, good morning, everybody. We are so happy to be back with you again this morning and really excited that you've stayed with us on this kind of walk through the book of Philippians. I don't know about you, but I just feel like when we picked this, we had no idea how relevant it would be to everything we're walking through right now. So I have really enjoyed my personal devotional times in this book over the last few weeks. And I'm so excited to dive into chapter 4, the final chapter, with my friend Alita. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. Considering we're in isolation, your hair is like spot on today.
Well, thank you. I'm living on dry shampoo these days. You just can't see it. And you can't see all the gray hairs. This is the magic of Zoom, I've decided. And it
yes.
covers all evils.
It really does. And nobody has any idea that I am in my pajama pants right now.
I'm leggings and slippers right now.
Maybe, I don't know, Alita. It does have its pros a little bit, right?
Yeah, these are some of the highlights, the good parts.
Yeah.
But it's tough putting jeans back on every now and again. And I'm
like, I know. I'm actually making myself do it like every few days. Like, oh, right. I need to, yes.
Check on this.
I'm happy to see you. How's your fam? Are they doing good?
Yeah, we're doing good. Yeah, just homeschooling, kind of trying to navigate our way through that. But it's fine. I keep saying it's like Groundhog Day every day.
Yeah.
Same day over and over again.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting like what day of the week it is. Like, where are we in the week cycle right now, right? And even at work, it's just so interesting because everybody's meetings have been changed and everybody at CLA, like we're kind of rotating staff, like, so we don't have too many staff in the building at the same time. And so even then, like when you get into the office, you never know who you're going to see. It's just very weird. It's like everybody has this sense of, I don't know what day it is. I don't know whatever, but we're just walking along. Anyway, and I'm happy to see you. And this is good. I know that on Wednesdays we're doing this. Oh, and I want to let ladies know that starting next week, we are going to be walking through the book of Ruth. And we're going to be going through the study in Right Now Media that Bianca Olthoff has on the book of Ruth. It's excellent. I was looking at a lot of different ones, and I really thought that hers was another just really fitting study for this season. So you can join up online right now. It's on clachurch.com in the pop-up section, and join up and study with us through the book of Ruth. So you can watch the videos on Right Now Media, and then we'll be discussing the questions on Wednesday mornings at 10:30 over Zoom. So if you're interested in doing that, sign up or email me. I'll send you the Zoom link every week, and it's going to be great. But awesome. Well, I'm excited to get into this study this morning, and I love that we both have our little mugs with us. Nice. So
not planned, but appropriate.
I'm sporting all the her merch today. Yes. I think when we actually are able to meet again, I'm gonna find some really spot on merch for us all. I feel like it will be worth celebrating to, just really
back together.
Yep. I can hardly wait. So I loved chapter 4. Did you?
I did.
Yeah.
It was a really appropriate way to end the book.
Yeah, I think so.
Tied in so many of the themes that you found throughout the book all together. Of course, it's Paul. Of course, he tied it all together in a really good way.
Yeah, I you know what? It's interesting because I have just watched on television, and I think it's on Netflix or it's on Amazon Prime. I can't remember, but they have the Book of Acts, which was and it's really good because it gives such a good view of what the character of Paul is kind of like. Like, you have this idea in your mind of what he's kind of like, but he's a pretty incredible kind of a guy. And when you actually read through the book of Philippians and, you look at his themes of contentment and joy, and despite his circumstances, you're like, this is a remarkable guy. I mean, when he says be imitators of me, like he's a pretty high standard of someone to imitate, for sure. So
sure.
So why don't we start? Do you want to kick us off on tell us what your thoughts are when you were reading through Philippians 4. What's something that kind of stood out to you?
Well, So one thing that stood out to me in this chapter is in verse 4, he starts talking about this theme that we see over and over again, which is joy.
Yeah.
Rejoice. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. And so I'm the kind of person, when I read scriptures like that, I'm always the person that asks how. Like, you're telling me to do this, but how do I actually walk this out?
Yeah.
Like, how do I flesh this out? And then, and you know, how do you rejoice when life is hard, when curveballs are thrown at you? How do you rejoice when there's loss in the midst of COVID-19, when there's financial loss and all these different things? And then he goes on to say, don't be anxious in verse 6. And again, I read those sort of things and I go, how do we not be anxious? And I don't tend to be an anxious person anyways.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I have anxious moments. I can deal with anxiety every now and again. And so I certainly know what that's like. And I like that he tells us that this is the way that we should act, or this is the way that we should behave. And then he gives us an answer to the how. He tells us in verse 11, I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need and what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And he said, and how? I can do all this through him who gives me strength.
Yes.
So his strength is found in the Lord. That's how he's able to get through all that.
Right.
Back up previously, where he was talking about not being anxious, he talks about being prayerful. And to me, the answer to all of these different things, how do we rejoice? How do we not be anxious? And the answer is that we find our source of strength in the presence of the Lord.
Right.
It takes intentional time. I mean, and I always liken spending time with the Lord to working out, because it's a choice that you make.
Right.
It's something that you're not going to see the results of it, maybe even right in that moment. But as you kind of begin to create this space in your life, this regular rhythm where you decide to sit in his presence, speak to him, and then more importantly, let him speak to you and study his word, then slowly but surely you begin to see your faith muscles flexing, and you understand what it means to have strength in the midst of trials. You understand what it means to have an attitude like what Paul is saying. This is how I can rejoice, because no matter what I'm facing, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, my joy, my strength is found in the Lord. And that can stay consistent regardless of life doing this. So yeah, reading that for me was like, oh, just so encouraging for these very weird days. I keep saying these days are like living in a big question mark right now. But this is very grounding to remind me the thing that matters is being with my God, fixing my eyes on him, and that enables me to rejoice, and he strengthens me. So,
yeah, you know, when I was reading through that portion too, I couldn't help but think of, even yesterday as I shared about Habakkuk, if anybody watched it online, but just it's a very similar theme in that Habakkuk is, again, you know, a guy that is going through a lot of turmoil. And I love that at the end of Habakkuk, again, he pens that verse that says, even though the olive branches bear no fruit, and even though the cattle barns are empty, and even though the grass isn't growing, I will rejoice. And so it's an intentional decision to say, you know what, God, even though I don't understand the circumstances I'm in right now, I actually look at your past faithfulness, and I am going to say, yeah, you're in control. Like, you've been faithful in the past, and I can actually rejoice knowing that despite everything, you've got it. And so I feel like I actually was looking at that this morning. I'm like, oh, they're actually very similar things. And both, same within Habakkuk too. He says, the sovereign Lord is my strength. What's my strength? It's really just the Lord that's going to uphold you in these seasons of uncertainty. So,
right. And I think it's kind of like sometimes we can get trapped in talking Christianese, you know, like especially people who are new to faith. What does it mean when we say the Lord is our strength?
Right.
That's a nice thing to say, but again, I'm not how is he your strength? How is he my strength? And so that's where I kind of always go back to the way we get to know him as our strength is by just intentionally carving out time choosing to sit at his feet, choosing to get to know him. And I think that that's kind of like one of the greatest, it's one of the hardest things to understand about Christianity, is that we spend our whole lives intentionally searching for someone that we've already found, you know?
It's good.
It's know him, but I don't know him.
Right.
And so I want to know him more. And the reality is that we can spend our whole lives this side of eternity. We can spend all of eternity and we still won't know him in full. And I think that it sounds strange, but it's so exciting. And there's just nothing like his presence.
There isn't. And you know, one of the things I feel like I've been really aware of, maybe in this season more than any other season, is that the enemy wants to keep you from doing anything but hearing the voice of God. And he loves it when we're distracted and busy, and when we actually will. So it is, Alita, it's just like you said with exercise, because I am not someone who I exercise because I have to, not because I want to. So it's that whole thing of like, anything can distract me. If I am going to go out for a run, or if I'm going to go to the gym, if a friend calls and says, hey, do you want to go out for coffee? Which of course we can't do right now, for sure. I'm canceling all my working out plans to go. And it's the same with the Lord. Like, our times with the Lord, I just feel like the enemy will do anything he can. Like, it's such a threat to him when we make a decision to be intentional about our time with the Lord. And so, you know, he would love it if even in this season, you know, we would find all our spare time scrolling through social media, fueling our worries and concerns, or parking ourselves in front of Netflix where and again, like you and I talked last time, and that there's fine, and that's a place for that. But I mean, when we start making that our habit instead of the presence of the Lord our habit, we're going to just be fueling those worries and anxieties and those concerns.
Absolutely. Right? It's whatever you fixate on.
Yeah.
That is where your faith comes from. And we can put our faith, we can fix our eyes on the Lord, and our faith can come from there. Or we can fix our eyes on scrolling through, like you said, all those other things, or even just the news, fixating on yes. We can fixate on those things, and then what we end up finding is that our faith gets diminished.
Yeah.
And it's what are we fueling?
What are we fueling? It's such an important question. And I think that is, even when Paul talks about here, what we should be fixing our eyes on. So, and I know, Alita, I have lost the verse right now, but when he says, whatever is noble, whatever is true, whatever is, like, fix your eyes on these things, because I think the mind has power, right? And it's that whole idea of what you think about. Your mind kind of shapes your life. And so, you can, when you focus your mind on Christ and those things, it changes your perspective on everything.
Verse 8, whatever.
Verse 8. Sorry, thank you. Yes,
you're right. But totally. It's whatever we fix and that's what Paul is pointing us towards.
Yeah. So good. That is a good thought. And for me, okay, so for sure, the rejoicing is just his overall demeanor and theme in this whole entire letter, and something that we can absolutely take away as we walk out of the book of Philippians, to be in a mindset where in this time of uncertainty, and where we are all walking through a season where things are uncertain and inconvenient, and there's been adjustments, what attitude are we doing that with? Absolutely, that's been a theme. And then the other one that really stood out for me was like sort of a bit cringy and a bit uncomfortable. And that was his verse 2 in chapter 4. And so we're backtracking a little bit, but that just stood out to me when he said, now I appeal to you, Euodia and Syntyche, please, because you belong to the Lord, settle your disagreement. And I ask you, my true partner, to help these two women, for they worked hard with me in telling others about the good news. They worked along with Clement and the rest of my co-workers whose names were written in the book of life. So, I mean, you almost have to imagine that, this church is getting this letter, and in front of the whole church, Paul is actually going to address this issue of disagreement. I'm assuming he probably heard about it from Epaphroditus when he went down there to help him in prison. They were probably having a conversation, and it came up. And Paul is like, no, actually, we gotta we got to talk about that. And it's significant, because you really do believe that the word of God is Holy Spirit inspired, and that there's a reason that this is in the word of God. And to me, it's such a critical issue, Paul thinks, that he's actually going to put it in this letter. It's significant, right? And clearly when he says these women were leaders in helping me, lead this, set up this church and tell about the work, it's because leaders define culture, right? And this leadership is going to impact the community. So I think he's saying, ladies, like, whatever your differences are, in light of what everybody is looking on you, you've got to kind of work out your differences here. How relevant that is in the church today, right? How two parties disagreeing in leadership or in any kind of study or any kind of community group or any kind, like, it can affect the whole entire congregation eventually. And I like that Paul addresses that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how they would have felt reading it.
Uncomfortable, I assume.
Yeah, the letters were read out loud to the congregation.
Right.
So, you sit up straight in your chair if you're one of those ladies. Like, I just got called out in front of my whole church.
Totally.
But I also think that speaks to the beautiful reality of church discipline.
Yeah.
Necessary. We need people like Paul in our lives who we trust.
Yeah.
Who can call us out on our stuff, whether you're a man or a woman. We need to be called out on our stuff sometimes when it is affecting the church, when we're just members of the body.
Yeah.
When two parts like them are unhealthy, it affects the health of the whole body.
It
and
really
like you were
does.
saying, when they're kind of trying to create culture at the beginning of laying the foundation of what Christianity would become. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this was Holy Spirit inspired. There's so many lessons, so many sermons that could be just on this.
I know.
Own, right?
Yeah. I like how he does it too, and this was a good, like, he's such a leader. I love that he doesn't take sides.
Yeah.
He doesn't put them down. Mm-hmm. He's actually just, like, he's not addressing them as people. He's just addressing the issue. And he's saying, guys, like, take care of that, right? And it's this whole idea too. I think a church like the Church of Philippi, they were up against so much opposition anyway, that the last thing they actually needed was opposition from within the church. Like, they needed, as a church, to be in unity. He's like, guys, there's going to be enough stuff here. You guys got to kind of figure this out and work together and work out your disagreements.
Right. And it wasn't just a calling out. It was like you said, the spirit he did it in was in gentleness. And and that is how we address things, or how we should, like, good leadership should address things within the church, is that we don't, church discipline happens because we care. It's not because we're just trying to, like, dismiss
controlling.
The church is built up, or is built out of broken people. Like, we are, we're a mess. We all are. No matter how long we've been walking with the Lord, and we are all sinners, and we're just, we're all running the race. We're all trying to do our best. So Paul is, it's just an important thing that it's not an often talked about thing in church, but I love that it's in there. It's so good.
I know, it is such an example to me of the things that, again, the things that matter to God, right? The things that matter to God. So, Alita, like, as we wind down and we wrap up the book of Philippians, and we're going to talk about it today at 10:30, as a group of women over Zoom, but is there something that you're like, this was my takeaway from this book? This is my takeaway. Yeah,
I think two things, and I talked about it on the first day that we were here, but he talks a lot about the gospel.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The importance of carrying the gospel, and then of course rejoicing. And he says in chapter 1, verse 27, whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And whether that looks like rejoicing or, he has all sorts of exhortations in here. But for this season right now, being that particular verse has just really landed with me and kind of been one of the ones that I've just stuck to.
Yeah.
Because I'm not really anywhere right now. I'm at home with my kids, and I hold it as a challenge right now. Like, how am I conducting myself?
Yeah.
I'm not really around people right now. I can't be around my neighbors or, anywhere else, but I'm home. And am I conducting myself in front of my children in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ? Like, they see me up close and center. They see me stressed out. They've seen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But what is their story of these days going to be? My mom was stressed out. My mom was losing her mind, and she didn't want us home. And I mean, there are days, there are moments. I'm not going to, I've had those moments. But just in general, am I conducting myself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ in front of my kids, in front of my family? Is that the legacy that I'm trying to pass on? Is that the culture I'm creating in my own home? So I know that that's just sort of like a one verse that's not really necessarily a theme throughout the whole book, but that's just the one that I keep coming back to. It's underlined and highlighted in my Bible, and I think about it every day. Is what I'm doing right now. Am I representing the gospel of Christ to my kids?
Yeah.
Because more than any stranger or anybody else that I know, I want my kids to be able to say when they're adults, yeah, my mom had her days, but for the most part,
yeah,
this is what she lived for, and it was real. It wasn't just something that she talked about. She lived it. So
right. So good. That is so good, Alita.
Debbie, what's your big takeaway?
Well, I feel like I can't. I mean, okay, I will tell you that I felt like when I read the verse, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for what he has done. Yeah. And I feel like this has actually just kind of been a theme in my life, especially as I was preparing to speak on Habakkuk again, and then having it reiterated in the book of Philippians. It's this whole idea of when we park ourselves in our worries, they just actually get bigger. So you can park yourself in your worry, or you can, again, park yourself in worship like Habakkuk did, and what clearly Paul is doing here. And it's this whole theme that both of them had, is when Paul says that, thank God for what he has done. It's this idea of continually reminding yourself of God's faithfulness to you in the past with things. Like, even God knows in my past, and I go, oh, that was a blessing that he closed that door, or that was a blessing that he didn't actually answer my prayer the way I thought. God does see the big picture. He is in control of it all. And when I start to just reflect on his goodness in my life for the things in the past, his faithfulness all along, you're like, yeah, you know what? I really don't have to worry about this. God really does have this. And again, the enemy would love us to just land in worry and anxiety all the time. I think we've seen how that has become just a fixation. Even in this generation, there is just so much worry and anxiety, and how, the focusing our eyes on the Lord is a remedy for getting us through our anxiety and our worry. So that was a big one. And then, of course, that famous verse, that so many of us have, people have tattooed it on their backs. It's the whole, I can do all things through Christ that gives me strength, and in this season where we're all feeling like, are we going to get through? Are our finances going to be okay? Are our kids going to be okay? Are we going to have jobs at the end of this? Like, what is going on, Lord? You know what? In his strength, again, we can endure, we can get through, and we can do it with joy, like Paul. Yeah.
So good.
So good. It's been a great book.
It has been.
Yeah. So I'm glad we could walk through it, and it was good to see you, Alita.
So good to see you.
Yeah, I look so forward to that. We should have, you know what, maybe when we can actually have gatherings of even just a few people, we should do, just a tailgate party in the.
Oh, that would be fun.
Right?
I have seen women in the CLA parking lot all back their cars up to one another with their trunks open and they're all chatting. That's fun.
Right? Yep. I know, we should do it. So maybe soon, maybe we'll do that. So it's good to see you. And ladies, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we will look so forward to our conversation this afternoon or this morning at 10:30. And then again, we will plan to meet next week as we walk through the Book of Ruth. So Alita, thank you. Have such a great day.
Oh, thank you. Have a great
Okay.
day, guys.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.